Hello everyone, welcome back. Today I'm on the glorious island of Tenerife and driving this fabulous Volvo XC90 with the D5 engine, one of my favourite, if not the favourite, Volvo engine of all time, for me anyway. But before we go any further, I should explain, ladies and gents, that I am a lifelong fan of Volvo, and it all goes back to my childhood. So when we were about 5 or 6 years old onwards, I always have memories of every 2 or 3 years traipsing around the car dealers of York, where I grew up in the north of England, looking at the next family car. And one particular Saturday, it was in January, and this was when I was about 5 years old, so it would have been early 80s. So we'd traipsed around, we'd been to the BMW dealer, we'd been to the Audi dealer. Back in those days it would have been the 3 Series BMW and the Audi 80, I guess. And then, just as the sun was coming down, and it's funny the things you remember from childhood, but I do remember this clearly, we visited the Volvo dealer in York, and I laid my eyes on this most fabulous looking car, and I thought, that's the one. And it was, of course, the Volvo 240 in that blue colour, and I think you can still get that Volvo blue as far as I know. And what I was most bowled over with, because I was a very safety conscious child, was the large clunky doors, as well as this rather aggressive buzzer that came on every time you opened the door to warn you that the door was open, of course. And it had this big red fasten seatbelt light up at the top here, which it's still got to this day. It's still got those now. And so I said at the time, that's the car for us, that's the one, get that one. We didn't, unfortunately, but never mind. And so when I got a bit older, I started collecting these Corgi model cars and collected them for a number of years. And when it came to making out my Christmas list, all of my friends were interested in getting like the Corgi Lamborghinis, Ferraris, and all the sports cars, that Italian supercars, I guess, that I was never interested in. So I asked Santa for a Volvo 760 in bronze, and sure enough, he delivered. Santa always delivered to me. The Santa's a good egg. When I was younger, he never let me down. So on Christmas Day, I was looking at this Volvo 760 and thinking, it's only 7 years till I can drive. That's what I was thinking. And I thought, I must get, one of these days I'm going to own a Volvo, a real one with a proper engine and working wheels. Sure enough, one of my first cars that I ever had was a Volvo 360. Not the 340 with the smaller engines, but the 360 with the 2-litre engine. It basically drank more fuel, but had the same power as the 1.7, as I recall. But it was a really well-spec'd car. So it had, if you think, this was, mid-90s? For your first car, it was really well spec'd. It had heated front seats, nice padded thick seats, central locking, rev counter, and none of my friends who had like Ford Escorts and Vauxhall Corsas of the day had any of that. But my Volvo also had a long wave radio, that's all I could get, and a choke. Now, for those of you who are from like me, a prehistoric era when cars had chokes, I don't think they still do. I don't actually know what the function of it was. Perhaps my friend Neil Turner can explain to us what the point of a choke was.
Any modern car, whether it's a petrol or a diesel like this one, doesn't matter what the weather's like, they always start without a fuss. But that's not always been the case. Before 1992, when catalytic converters became mandatory and people weren't so worried about emissions, a lot of cars still had carburetors and they had a choke. And if you're young, you may not have even seen one before. So how does a choke work? This is a basic diagram of a carburetor. You have air coming in and fuel. And this is the throttle. So at idle, it will be like that. And as you press the accelerator, it opens up and allows the engine to suck more air and fuel in. The choke sits above the fuel inlet, and when you pull the choke lever, it effectively closes off the air enough to create a low pressure here and suck more fuel in, and hence you get a richer fuel mixture. So why haven't modern cars got a choke? Well, it's all done by computer. There's sensors for coolant temperature, inlet temperature, and they feed back to the ECU, which is the computer unit in the car, and that does everything on the fuel injection. So if it's a cold morning, it just knows that it needs to put a bit more fuel through, and it does it all automatically.
Anyhow, when I was looking at this Volvo 360, because of course at 17 years old you have other things on your mind as well. So when I was looking at this Volvo 360 that I was about to buy, I thought to myself, imagine how many girls would want to be seen in that. I mean, it's a stunning looking car. Well, not many as it turned out, but I still loved it. So as you know, if you've watched my previous videos, I love Tenerife and I love the Canary Islands. I come down here once every couple of months or so. So I was absolutely thrilled when C-Car offered me the use of this Volvo XC90. Now, I always hire a car when I'm down in the Canary Islands because there are no intercity trains that I'm aware of, and there doesn't need to be really. The bus services are good, public buses are generally quite good, but there's no better way than to hire a car to see the island. And C-Car is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, car hire firm in the Canary Islands. They've got a car for every occasion, so you can get anything from a Vauxhall Corsa right up to the XC90. I have had Range Rovers from them before. You just need to give a bit of notice, and I think they have a minimum 1 week rental on the Range Rovers. But certainly, if you look at the list of cars they've got, there's everything, and they're very affordable as well. The other thing that I really like about C-Car, and this will especially appeal to you if you only have a debit card, for whatever reason, they don't take, there's no insurance excess, so they don't take a huge hold on your credit or debit card. Because I've had it before I had credit cards, where you would go to hire a car, they insist on taking the full insurance excess against your debit or your credit card, and in some cases that can be £1,000 or more. So one of the things that really struck out when I was doing some research on the XC90 is it's been in production since 2002, so it's had a long production run and been facelifted along the way. But up until 2018, and here's an interesting fact, not one person on the entire planet had been killed in an accident involving an XC90. Now sadly that's no longer a true fact, because somebody was killed in one around 2018, but it happened in America or Canada, and the police think that the car was going at more than 100 miles an hour, rolled over and then hit a tree. Even an armoured car would struggle with something like that. So I think that's a very healthy safety record for any car. I mean, let's face it, with a safety record like that, you'd get into this car quite happily, even if Prince Philip was driving. It's that good. But why have I got excited about an XC90, you might ask, when you could be looking at an X5, an Audi Q7? Well, obviously, I'm very loyal to the Volvo brand because it kind of suits me. The car says a lot about you. And as I said earlier, I was always a very safety-orientated child. I was a bit weird like that. But the truth is that there are better handling cars than this. I do love this. It's very nice to drive, and we'll come back to some of the spec level in a moment, but if you get a BMW, you're going to get finer handling. There's no doubt about it. Like all BMWs, they go around corners like they're on rails. Well, this doesn't. This wobbles like a blancmange. But I quite like blancmange, to be fair, so I don't have a problem with that. Audis are nice cars, but they're not for me. This one's got working indicators, for example. That's an optional extra on an Audi. So, yeah, Audi doesn't really suit me. And I actually Googled alternatives to the Volvo XC90, and it came back with a few odd things, like a Kia Sorento. Now, I've driven a Kia Sorento, but does it really compare to this? I'm not sure it does, to be honest. I have no problem with Kias. I quite like Kias, actually. I've nearly bought them in the past. But perhaps my affiliation with Volvo is just playing a big part here. So I don't know if you've ever seen that film, Crazy People, that starred Dudley Moore. It was out a few years ago, and he came up with this crazy marketing slogan, which eventually resulted in him being sectioned into a mental unit, called Volvos. They're boxy, but they're good. And I actually think that sums up this car perfectly. But there's nothing wrong with that. Remember, the reason I fell in love with the Volvo brand was the Volvo 240, and that was boxy, if nothing else. And I think I think it retains its Volvo good looks, yet has some elegance to it. It's boxy, but it's good. A bit like me. In terms of ride and drive comfort, I mean, this has got everything. This has got just what you need. It's perfect for me. It's got a decent spec level. Everything's laid out really nicely. The only thing that I find challenging with Volvos, and this is no exception, is this centre console, which it's fine once you've done your Volvo training at NASA and you're a qualified rocket scientist, but up until then, this isn't the most intuitive system. In fact, it's positively unintuitive. But that said, once you master it, and remember I've had 6 years to get used to it, so I'm just about there with it. I can just about navigate my way around the system to navigate to an address. Is the very fundamental question: do I actually need an XC90? Do I need a car this size? Probably not. Would I like a car this size? Definitely, yes. With the D5 engine, like I said, the first time I ever drove a D5 was in a Volvo S80, which was, I don't know if they still make them, but it might be the S90 now. But the Volvo S80 was a car that I absolutely loved, and that was not just because it had a nice luxurious leather interior and it was lovely to drive, but because it had this fabulous D5 engine which was punchy yet economical, and a very fast car to drive. The last diesel Volvo that I had was the D4, which was okay but seemed positively flat compared to the D5 engine. Trust me on that. If you're going to get a Volvo, get the D5, and that comes from a lifelong Volvo fan who's had a lot of them. So the fuel economy on this is not as good as the S80, is what I would say, but I didn't expect it to be. This is a car that weighs 2.5 tons, so it's a lot of metal to be shifting, but the D5, whilst not being as efficient, makes very light work of it. This car will leave a lot of other similar type of cars standing. In terms of ride comfort, I don't think Volvos can be beaten, in my experience, and as I say, I've owned a few different cars over the years. The only car that's ever come close to being anywhere near as comfortable as this was the Saab, and I've had a couple of Saabs, the Saab 9000 and then the Saab 95. Now, I always thought the Saab 95 was a really nice car to drive on motorways. It was so relaxing, but the seats were really comfortable, which is just as well, because I spent a lot of time sat at the roadside waiting for the RSC to come and pick me up. But other than that, ride comfort is excellent on this car. It's definitely softer than my XC60. It brings back memories of driving that Volvo 360, actually. That's a good thing. And one other thing to note as well, ladies and gents, is unless you wear white suits cleaner than Don Johnson's, don't go for the cream interior. Trust me on that. These wear out very quickly on Volvo for some reason. In terms of strength, they're absolutely fine. They last the duration, and I've had high mileage Volvos. They do last, but they just look rubbish after a few thousand miles. This car's done about 45,000 miles, and as you can see, the steering wheel's wearing out, the seats are appearing to start to crack, and certainly the inclement weather here in Tenerife will have a part in that. But honestly, if you're going to get a Volvo, get the dark interior. Genuinely. Don't even think about getting cream, because as they age, it just ages terribly. So in terms of reliability, what can go wrong with Volvos? Well, in short, nothing and everything, frankly. I've never had a Volvo, a modern Volvo, or any Volvo in fact, that's been particularly troublesome. They are generally reliable, although you wouldn't believe that to read the Parker's reviews and Autocar and all that, where owners seem to have electrical problems. I've never had that in all the Volvos I've had. I've had a couple of minor issues. The current one, the service light's come on a few times, so that's just had to be reset at the dealer. The one thing that consistently goes on the diesels, and I'm sure this is probably the same with any other car diesel, with any other modern diesel, is the exhaust gas recirculation valve, the EGR valve, religiously goes at 50,000 miles on every one I've had, diesel that is. Obviously got replaced under warranty, but the symptoms are it'll start spluttering as if it's about to cut out, but it doesn't. And your fuel economy will also plummet as well. So I got that fixed at the dealers, but again at 50,000 miles, religiously everyone I've had has always been at that mileage. So if you're going to buy one second hand which is out of warranty, you might want to check that that's been done, because if it hasn't, it will need doing at some point, especially if you've got one, or looking at one, that's got more than 50,000 miles on. So, having spent some time in an XC90, what can I tell you about it? In short, I absolutely love it. I think it's a fabulous car. I actually don't think it's so ridiculously big that I couldn't get one for myself. Would I need one? Probably not. I Certainly don't need 7 seats, I'm not that sociable. But then again, you think there are times when it just comes in handy. You can easily fold the back seats down, and you know, I've got a couple of outdoor pursuits like clay pigeon shooting where you can do to have that extra bit of room. So when I'm sat in the hotel bar this evening on my 4th or 5th glass of Rioja, staring over the car park to this magnificent machine, I'll just be that extra bit happier, even happier than being in the Canary Islands usually makes me. And that's because I've spent the day with a Volvo. And that's a beautiful thing. Thanks for watching. See you next time.